Well, welcome back to the third Saturday in October. I am Bradley, with a new face beside me on the screen. I've got an Auburn fan who lives in Gator, Seminole, Hurricane,
Yeah, UCF.
Night Country. Jared Easley. Jared, great to have you on third Saturday in October.
Yeah, I don't feel like I deserve to be here. I'm like the kid that won't get out of your yard, Bradley. So you've graciously thrown me a bone. But man, I love me some SEC football. And with that said, let's get at it.
Yeah. So back from a little bit of a hiatus. I started a new job. Podcasting didn't really fit into the schedule. Um, Chris is off to some new ventures. He'll probably still be uh, joining us from time to time. Um, so we're going to call him executive producer. We're going to give him a fancy title.
Yeah.
And
And he will be back for those that are worried. Yeah.
oh yeah, so Chris is actually the reason that I know Jared.
Hmm.
So he can't get too far away.
No,
We both know where he
no,
lives.
we both are well equipped to harass Chris Murphy, and we will.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But we are very excited for this season of SEC football. We've got Texas and Oklahoma in the conference this year. Um, there are no divisions. It is the Wild Wild West, and there is a 12 team playoff beginning this year. So unfortunately, we can't get 12 SEC teams into the playoffs. I think the best we can do is eight or
yeah,
something close to that. So,
yeah, or the
hey, I'll take
least.
it.
Yeah.
Um, but basically, I think we're transitioning from the tailgate podcast to more of a water cooler podcast, and I'm okay with that. What we're going to do is we're just going to run through this slate of games that we just witnessed um, over the long weekend and look forward a little bit to what's going to happen this next week. So, hey, let's start with our Friday night games. Arkansas versus hosting Arkansas Pine Bluff. I didn't know that Arkansas Pine Bluff was a school, much less a football team. Um, 70 nothing.
Yeah, so
And
I have a funny note about that.
go ahead.
So Arkansas Pine Bluff, they actually received penalties that Arkansas declined because apparently they only have one jersey. Now, I may be wrong about that, but at least for that game, they wore a jersey that's, a colored jersey where they should have
Yeah.
wore like a different color apparently. So my understanding is their budget is very tight and they may only have one uniform. So,
Well, I mean, I don't know what the payout for this game was. I'm guessing it was around $1 million or more.
well worth it for Arkansas Pine Bluff, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hey, Arkansas winning 70 zip. Like
Yeah.
I it,
This
it
is
I know
got
it's
to be good
Arkansas Pine
news.
Bluff.
Yeah.
It's hard to score 70 points.
It's
I
got
know
to be
that.
good news for Arkansas fans for sure.
I mean, and as we go through these scores, it's gonna be like, really, it's hard to score 70 points. It is. Like it's hard to score 70 points against air. Um, but hey, good job for the
Well,
Razorbacks getting their mojo back a little bit.
yeah, and let's also remember who's the offensive coordinator for Arkansas? Do you know, Bradley?
Uh, it's this guy that wrecked a motorcycle and had
Yeah, he's
quite
got a little history at Arkansas, if I recall.
he does, and yeah, I mean maybe
But
he's
he's an
coming in
excellent
to,
offensive mind, and to have 70 points with him at the helm of the offense, I'm not that surprised, especially against
yeah,
Arkansas Pine Bluff. So,
yeah. I mean, I Arkansas is one of those teams that I'd like to see do well. Obviously, I don't ever want to see him beat my team, but I'm okay with Arkansas doing well, and
mhm.
I'm okay with these lower tier SEC teams getting some good wins.
Yeah,
Maybe except one that lost this week, but we'll get to that in a bit. Um, so yeah, I'm excited for Arkansas State. they've got to go to Oklahoma State this next week, and I mean, Mike Gundy's just a character. So I'm excited to see what some of that press is like this week, and of course in game leading up to that game, um, what's going to happen with Arkansas.
Well, I think the test with Pine Bluff is obviously, hey, let's maybe get some of these guys in, get some reps. We
Yeah,
know that they're looking to Oklahoma State next week, and rightfully so. And Oklahoma State's not going to be a cupcake, and that's
no,
an away game. So that's going to be the true test to see, hey, is Arkansas really, a team to be paying attention to?
yeah,
I don't think you should ever sleep on Arkansas, but that said, they've definitely had their share of tough years, we'll say. So it'd be
yeah,
nice to see Arkansas bounce back a little bit. And I'm not an Arkansas fan, and you're not either. But at the same time, man, I know what it's like to have my team down in the dumps, and don't wish that on the Arkansas fans this season. So I hope they
yeah,
can get a win against Oklahoma State. I love any time a SEC school can go against a non-conference opponent and get a win. I'm
yeah,
for it.
yeah. And it's it's fun when SEC teams run up the score because everybody else is doing it. So, peer pressure, we might as well too.
Right.
Um, the other game on Friday, Missouri versus Murray State, a win 51 nothing. So through two games, we've got 121 points for the SEC, 0 points against. I'm feeling pretty good about this. Missouri, I mean, bit of a kind of old school football team. Um, a lot of defense, a lot of running, and they scored quite a lot of points as well. And they threw it a little bit here, but um, I mean, Tennessee played them last year and kind of just got their teeth kicked in because they just run it right up the gut, and Missouri's just built that way.
Yeah.
A team that I want to hate on, but their first year in the SEC, they were in the SEC championship game out of the East. So I don't know.
Which Missouri in the East never made sense. So to take that out, that's finally.
I know. I wish that there'd been a little bit of realignment there somewhere, but
Yeah.
they didn't want to touch that. And now they just said, well, to heck with it all. We're just getting rid of divisions. Um,
It is impressive though that Drinkowitz has had the success or the building to success that he's had at Missouri.
yeah,
And 51 points doesn't surprise me with Drinkowitz against Murray State. And what they got Buffalo next week, so
yeah,
another cupcake most likely. Probably not 51, but they're gonna probably easily handle business there. Auburn has to play Missouri at Missouri this season, and I'm sure every Auburn fan is not excited to be going to Missouri because Missouri is not the team that is just a walkover anymore.
no,
So they were very good last season, and I don't know if they'll replicate that this season, but I know they're not going to be an easy win.
yeah. Well, what's interesting is they do have a very favorable schedule.
Yes.
Um, and with the likes of Murray State and Buffalo, like this is this is part of it. And um, I mean, personally, I like having a cupcake or two to warm up just because you don't know what you're going to get. And every game does mean so much. Although maybe it means a little bit less with the 12 team playoff now. Um, but we'll see. It can
I
be an
think the
easy
SEC
schedule.
regular season schedule is so good that you can
Yeah.
afford to have those cupcakes and still, I mean, look at Ohio State. I mean, their first three games are all cupcakes. So
Yeah. And it even if your schedule's set up favorably, you still have to go out and win all those games.
yeah,
Um,
that's true.
so um, next
And
we'll move
you
on.
can't predict like injuries and that you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, if we could predict what was happening, we'd all be much richer folks. But Oklahoma, so new guy to one of two new guys to the SEC, going up against Temple, um, breaking the streak. We finally had some points scored against the SEC. A field goal.
Yep.
Oklahoma wins 51-3 over Temple. Hey, welcome to the SEC. I guess this is your welcome party. But I don't know that this is. I mean, I think there are high expectations for Oklahoma. Um, it's I everyone I talk to, it's like I don't know how they're going to fare in the SEC, and I think part of it is because we've never seen an SEC this big, no divisions. What do you have to do to actually get to Atlanta this year? Because it used to be okay in the East for the last few seasons, you got to beat Georgia,
Yeah,
and you can kind of keep tabs on that. But now you're keeping tabs with everybody. And in
that's
the
true.
West, it was Alabama and LSU. Texas A&M kind of like to think they were there, but not quite there. Um, what did you see anything out of Oklahoma that made you think, okay, these guys are going to do okay in the SEC or anything else?
I think Oklahoma will get their true SEC test against Tennessee when Tennessee comes to town.
Yeah.
That's coming soon. But they got Houston before that. I don't think Houston is the team that you sleep on. But that said, Houston lost in week one against a group five opponent, I
Yeah.
want to say. So yeah, I'm not convinced Houston is where they want to be. They do have a new coach. I forgot his name, the guy from Tulane, Fritz, I think.
Yeah.
And I think Houston will be in a better situation in the long run. That said, this might be a little bit of a rough season for Houston, so I don't anticipate them putting up, a win against Oklahoma. So
Yeah.
yeah, Oklahoma and Tennessee. I think that's when we'll know, hey, where does Oklahoma stand against true SEC competition? And that's not
Yeah.
going to be a gimme game for Tennessee, but I don't think Tennessee needs to be afraid either. And we'll get to Tennessee in a little bit. So
Yeah. So that kind of raises an interesting question. So new coach to any program. And let's take out any Jeremy Pruitt like sanctions where you find out somebody's doing something illegal. My my thought, and now with the transfer portal being like we're kind of falling into how the transfer portal works. I used to think, okay, you got to give a guy 5 years because you really have to give him time to get his guys in there, and he's got a full plate of his personnel there before you can really evaluate, is he going to be a good coach or do we need to go elsewhere? Because that first class doesn't matter when you fire your old coach, that new class, like he's just trying to piece together whatever he can. And that next class, it's a little bit more of his class. That third class is finally, okay, these are the guys that we've recruited as juniors and seniors. Now they're on the team. Give them a couple years to learn the systems and really contribute on the field. Jared, do you have a feeling for like how long a coach should be given before it's really determined, okay, this is the coach for us going forward, or we need to change gears again?
I still think your point of 5 years is um, probably realistic, but let's be honest. Most SEC schools, especially the super blue bloods, the bigger programs, they're not patient, and
Right.
they want it now. They want it yesterday. So it's not uncommon, sadly, to see a coach that'll come in and get the boot pretty quick. Now, that being said, Auburn had hired Brian Harsin out of Boise State, and they knew after just a little bit after a season that, hey, this isn't going to work. We got to go.
Yeah.
And they got rid of him, and then they brought in Hugh Freeze, and all signs seemed to be that was the right decision. I was not a fan of Brian Harsin, so I was glad to see him go.
Yeah.
That said, you have points like Cristobal at Miami, and he's in what his maybe his third season, I think, and he's third or fourth, and he's just now starting to see the benefits of that, kind of building from the high school ranks,
Right.
supplementing through the portal with Cam Ward, which we'll talk about here in a little bit against Florida. But, that's a good example. And then Norvell is actually a good example too. Like, I know they had the week one loss or week zero loss against Georgia Tech, but
Yeah.
last season was a great example. They were undefeated regular season, but those first few seasons prior to that were a little bit rough. And if they'd given up on him after 2 years or 3 years, they wouldn't have had what they had last year. So I
Right.
think just depends on the program, depends on the recruiting, depends on the portal. Um, you know, could Colorado turn it around under Dion? My thoughts are, let's see what happens this season, but I'm not convinced yet that you can just build a winner mostly from the portal. Although Ole Miss seems to be doing a lot of that, and they're doing okay. So I don't know. It's kind of the Wild West, like you said. And
Yeah.
then you got Dabo Sweeney who won't adapt at all. So I don't know what impact that has.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want any NIL money, don't go to Clemson. If if
Yeah,
if you're in the transfer portal, don't expect to get a call from Clemson. Um, I don't I don't know how long you can resist not playing the game of Power Four college football in 2024. I mean, I you're either growing or you're dying, and I don't know, Dabo. I mean, I love to hate you, but like,
yeah.
give it a shot. Like, just
Well, USC is a good example. So last year they had a terrible defense. They brought in a new defensive coordinator. They did well recruiting. They did well with the transfer portal, and then we saw they got a win,
yeah,
against LSU. So um, there's a lot of things that probably could have happened in that LSU game that should have happened, but USC did get that win, and
yeah,
I think part of the reason is because they've adapted. They went out and said, okay, what are the pieces that we need, and any school that's not doing that is likely going to, sadly, be in the Clemson situation. Um, so yeah, if you got the money and you can do it, you need to do it.
yeah. Um, yeah. I don't know how some of these schools are going to thrive long term without NIL. I mean, it was Saban just a couple years ago, audio leaked of him talking about A&M and what kind of money they're putting into NIL. Um, he thought he was talking to a private audience, didn't realize this audio was going to get leaked, and it came out like A&M is buying their players. Now A&M may be, I mean, kind of everybody is, but uh, you know, Saban got out because he realized I don't want to have to play this game where I'm having to work NIL money to try to recruit players. It was just totally different from how he really coached his entire career. And he's like, I think he just woke up and said, I don't want to have to deal with it. Um, I don't want to have to deal with these conversations of kids saying, "Hey, when am I playing so I can get more money?" And kind of he felt like he didn't have all the decision power because now there's this money game that's kind of dictating things from boosters too. So, uh, yeah, I'm
It, it's high
if I were
risk, high
Saban, I would have gotten
reward.
out too.
Yeah.
So,
A good example of this. I mean, I heard. I'm now drawing a blank. What's the name of the coach from Nebraska? Matt Rule.
yeah,
He was talking about, okay, you go out in the portal and you try to get a quarterback. If you're going to get a top tier quarterback, that's $1 million, right?
yeah,
That may be for a 1 year rental, right? So that's a
yeah,
lot of money. We look at North Carolina that played Minnesota this past weekend, and North Carolina lost their transfer quarterback in the first game of the year, and I think he's out for the season. He has a broken leg. And he's the one that transferred in. I don't know what they paid him in
Yeah.
NIL, but now he's out. He's
Yeah.
gone. So whatever NIL money was spent to get him in there, that's a bust. So I don't mean North Carolina's gonna have a bad season, but man, that's a tough hit to take. So, but on the
It
other
really
hand,
is.
yeah, Cam Ward at Miami. I mean, you saw him, what he did against Florida. So, uh, but then you got DJ. I can't pronounce his last name. DJ at Florida State that used to be at Clemson and Oregon State. I mean, he's verdict's still out. Is that a good pickup? He was a 5-star out of high school, but he's kind of not had the college career that people thought he might. So
Right. Yeah. It's a wild world.
it is.
I can't talk today. Um,
It's all good. Yep.
but speaking of wild,
Yes.
uh, Golden Black, just a few miles up the road from me, Vanderbilt against Virginia Tech, hanging on 34-27. I mean, I this game was one of the early kickoffs. I was watching it as I was waiting for Tennessee to kick off. Um, and I believe Vanderbilt scored first, and it was kind of back and forth. Never, no one ever really pulled ahead by too much. Um, and really excited to see Vanderbilt win. And then did I see did I see Vanderbilt students storming the field? I mean, I'm surprised, but also very excited. I know a lot of Vanderbilt fans, and I I didn't see them on the field, but I know they were just as excited as those 14 students that stormed the field.
Absolutely. Man, I was thrilled for Vanderbilt. I couldn't
Yeah,
have been happier for Vanderbilt. I love seeing them hang with a quality opponent because I don't believe Virginia Tech is that awful. I think they had a rough
right.
first week, obviously, and they got caught sleeping against a Vanderbilt team that was hungry and ready for, some success.
Yeah,
And man, good for Coach Lee because Vanderbilt is impossible to win at. So yes, those
yeah,
kids, those students did storm the field and rightfully so. Uh, now, does that mean Vanderbilt's going to a bowl game this year? We'll see. But they do have a new offensive mind on the staff. I'm not sure exactly what his coaching title is, but it's Jerry Kill. He was the former head coach at Minnesota. He was also at New Mexico last year when they came into Auburn and whooped Auburn. I mean, this guy is a good mind for football, and he's a nice addition to that Vanderbilt staff. And then they got the transfer quarterback from New Mexico as well. So,
yeah,
and that guy can play. I mean, we saw it if you watched any of the highlights against Virginia Tech. He won them the game.
yeah,
And so, is he going to be able to do that every week? I don't know, but he is a good player and he deserves, to be, in the SEC and playing these elite teams. And so good on Vanderbilt to beat Virginia Tech. And, I'm kind of quietly rooting for Vanderbilt against everyone but my team. So
yeah.
yeah.
And
Well, and yeah, I'll let Tennessee, have
yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
won't
and
root for them against Tennessee, but
yeah, well, I mean, I want to see Vanderbilt, like you said, kind of beat everybody but my team. And
right.
it's one of those things where football is very cyclical and teams get good for a while, but Vanderbilt, it's just like it's hard to get over that hump. And I know
So hard. Yeah.
they don't get a lot of the support from the school to put money towards their facilities, which is
Which
big.
is weird. They're in Nashville. They're in a great city. That doesn't make sense to me, but whatever,
I know, and they're still working on that stadium,
Well,
which
yeah,
which
there
get
are teams with worse stadiums.
yeah,
Vanderbilt doesn't have it that bad. They yeah, for whatever reason, they could be, much better than they are, and I hope that they can eventually get to that point. So,
yeah. And I've been to some of the tailgates. It's fun. They've got uh for those who don't know, I literally grew up two blocks from Vanderbilt's football stadium, and until I was till I was 11, and on especially on Saturday nights, you could hear the PA announcer off in the distance from our backyard, and went to a bunch of Vanderbilt football games growing up. Um, but going down Natchez Trace, it's cool. They've got I don't know if they still do it, but they had a little stage with a live band playing right before you walk in to the main gate there. And it was a fun tailgate atmosphere. It was not the Grove. It was not it wasn't anything like down on the plains. It wasn't the Vol Navy. It was none of that, but it was still a fun atmosphere. And I I'd like to see Vanderbilt have more wins like this against teams like Virginia Tech. Um, Especially when you can say, "Hey, look, the bottom of the SEC is winning the non-conference games against other Power Four teams." I mean,
Yep.
that's bragging rights.
That's
So,
right. Yeah, everybody looks at Vanderbilt as the they're the worst of the SEC. So when you have, our little brother that we pick on, so to speak, go out and beat Virginia Tech, it's like, hey, good on you, man.
yeah, yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
now know your role. Get back in line.
Yeah.
But
And
but yeah,
and
I'm thrilled they beat Virginia Tech.
yeah, and they've got Alcorn State next. So
Yeah,
look out,
that's starting
Vanderbilt's
off 2-0. I mean, I don't know how often Vanderbilt gets 2-0, but
right.
likely to get it this year.
Especially when you schedule Virginia Tech as your first game.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm glad to see Vanderbilt never lost hope. Um, Speaking of losing hope, if I were a Georgia fan, that first half against Clemson, oof, I like that was not a pretty first half
No.
for Georgia. Just couldn't get going. But they did win 34-4. Um, they really found themselves in the second half. I know my father-in-law is just happy to come out of week one with a win. Um, and I know Dabo was saying after the game that, hey, that was a butt whooping. We just got it handed to ourselves uh today, and Georgia is right now the team to beat
Yeah,
in my eyes.
I think that's absolutely true. I think Georgia can hang with anybody in the country. Clemson's not a bad school. We make fun of them. We make fun of Dabo, but Clemson's still a good team. And,
Yeah.
most Clemson can hang with most of the schools in SEC and probably beat most schools that mid-tier level for sure. So, yeah, a quality win there in week one. And, yeah, expect big things from Georgia this season.
Yeah. Clemson's one of those teams where I'm glad it doesn't make monetary sense for them to join the SEC because stylistically they run kind of an SEC style offense and defense. Um, they would instantly be competitive in the SEC, but they don't bring a lot of market share to the SEC like an Oklahoma or a Texas would. I know Texas A&M's there, but Texas had their own network. Like one team had their own network. So that's
Yeah,
just
that didn't
that
work out well for them, by the way.
no, it didn't. They
Certainly did
were
not endear them. That's why Texas A&M ended up in the SEC. So thank you, Texas.
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we have Texas to thank for that. Um, but yeah, so Georgia beats Clemson 34-4. Then Tennessee takes on Chattanooga. Just, I mean, it's not that far. Hour and a half, 2 hours, I think. 69-3. Um, my thoughts on this were I'm going into the game having seen Nico against Iowa, a really stout defense,
Yeah.
but and it's it's been a few months since that Iowa bowl game. I don't remember Nico really going deep down the field. He didn't really have an opportunity with the stout Iowa defensive line, front seven. He's really just kind of taken what the defense gave him, scrambled quite a bit, had a couple of rushing touchdowns, threw it underneath. So coming in, I'm like, okay, is it just, I know he can throw the ball, but can he master the offense to really spread it out? And first couple series, like just pretty vanilla, just hey, let's get used to playing in Neyland Stadium. And then in the third series, I really felt like they opened it up. He was pushing the ball downfield. That was great to see. Um, I was also very excited to see the receivers catching passes because I think that's something that really hurt Joe Milton last year.
Yeah,
Receivers dropping passes that hit them in the hands.
brutal. Yep.
And that really shakes your quarterback's confidence. So for a redshirt freshman quarterback, that was great. Whereas last year you've got a, I guess, sixth year senior quarterback having receivers drop passes. That, I mean, I really think that shook his confidence for the rest of the year. Um, would we have made it to the playoffs last year if our receivers had caught passes the first two, three games? I don't think so, but I think Joe would have been more impressive last year, but that's the past. Nico is the
Yeah, he's the
future,
future
and
for
I
sure.
I felt really good about this game. Um, he set records for a first half in an opener, and I mean, there's all sorts of stats. I can't keep up with him, but he played really well, and I was really excited for that, for our receivers, for our running backs. I knew our lines were going to be stout, and our secondary, which is completely new. Thank you to the portal. Um, we've got zero returning starters in our secondary, so it's all transfer portal and guys that have been in the system now getting a chance to start. Um, I feel like in every area, Tennessee played well this weekend.
Yeah, Tennessee has, in my opinion, a very bright future, and this season, I think is going to be a wonderful, good season for Tennessee, compared to what seasons have been prior to Heupel. And yeah, Nico's, I believe, every bit as good as advertised. Now you got a neutral site game coming up with NC State, and then of course
Oof.
you got Oklahoma,
Yeah.
at Oklahoma. So there's some good tests that are coming up, but I think Tennessee's up for it.
Yeah. NC State did not play great in week one. Um, so uh, hopefully hopefully Tennessee coming in with confidence to neutral site, but it's really a home game for NC State because it's in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Um, I, I I hope that Tennessee just kind of rides this
But Charlotte's
momentum.
close enough. Yeah, those UT fans are going to show up. So
Yeah,
it'll be a good crowd.
yeah,
So
yeah. We travel well.
absolutely. Yeah,
Then
I'll be watching that game. I'm curious to see how that plays out. I do anticipate Tennessee handling business, but
yeah,
NC State, if they get some of their stuff fixed, they were pretty good last year. So
and I know this is not fun for people who are colorblind, but when Tennessee played NC State, it was 10, 12 years ago in one of these early season games. It was a color rush game. NC State, I think, wore all red. Tennessee, I think, wore orange jerseys and white pants.
yeah,
Whatever it is, like I wouldn't mind seeing something like that because they are both very bold colors. We'll see. Um, so we come to a team that I love to hate.
hmm
And I can really only blame Steve Spurrier for this hatred because he was the ultimate troll and trash talker. Um, Florida loses in convincing fashion to Miami 41-17. Billy Napier's third season is not starting well.
yeah. I don't think Florida is terrible. That said, home loss like that. That's a hard way to start out the season, but I am going to give Miami credit. Miami has built their team very well over the last couple seasons with Cristobal there,
Yeah,
and I think Miami is likely your ACC champions, more than likely a playoff team. We'll see how it goes, but I don't think this loss to Florida, when we look at the end of the season, I don't think Florida's going to look back and be like, well, we were just terrible. I think Florida's still good. They have the hardest schedule in all of football, I think.
yeah,
Their schedule is horrible. So don't expect Florida to, yeah, don't expect 8 wins. Don't even expect 7 wins. I mean, it's going to be a rough year for Florida.
yeah,
And it's not going to get any easier. But Miami is a good team and give them credit. Miami played well, and you will likely see Miami in the playoffs.
yeah. I mean, Miami's a good team. Florida State, though they did lose to Georgia State. This is not your dad's Georgia State.
No,
I'm sorry, Georgia Tech. Uh, so so don't sleep on Georgia Tech. Don't sleep on Florida State. Um, and Florida's got to play Miami and Florida State every year. I mean, that's
yeah.
and when they are both doing well, those are two non-conference games that can be really tough. As
Well, they're
evidenced
right.
by game
Yeah.
one.
They're playing UCF this year too, and when they
Yeah,
scheduled that, UCF was not a P4 school.
yeah,
Now they are, and UCF's on the rise. Now I don't know that UCF's going to be able to beat Florida, but what I do know is UCF's not a cupcake, and they weren't a cupcake even in the AAC. But they're a team that's only likely to get better over the long haul. So that's going to be, another challenging situation for Florida. But I don't think Florida fans should give up on Napier just yet. They probably want to, but I'm not convinced he's this awful coach that's incapable. I do think they've had a rough go. But
yeah,
if you can be patient and kind of let Napier do his thing, I'm not convinced he can't turn it around. But I understand the patience thing. If this were my school, I wouldn't be happy.
yeah. And I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. And the reason I brought it up is this is year three.
Yeah.
So you're only now starting to get your players um, on the field. I mean, you've got some transfer guys, but you know, the problem with transfers is they're older, they're more mature, they're ready to play, but they aren't necessarily well versed in your system. And so,
Yeah, or maybe completely bought into the culture. There's a number of things that, could be going on there.
yeah. So it's interesting to see where Florida goes. They've got Samford this week. So hopefully they can kind of find their rhythm
Yeah,
against
they'll bounce
Samford.
back and get some confidence, and then they got the gauntlet. So
Yeah. Then we've got uh another newcomer. Texas took on Colorado State. Uh, they win 52-0 against Colorado State. I mean, this is kind of
yep.
what you expect out of Texas
Yeah,
coming
we saw
off
we saw
of,
Arch Manning get a
yeah,
touchdown. So, or
yeah.
maybe I don't know how many touchdowns he had, but I know he had at least one. So
And making some smart decisions with uh wasn't quite sure if that was a forward pass or a lateral. Um, but it
yeah,
it doesn't matter because it worked.
it
Uh,
did.
yeah, but Texas has Michigan coming up this week in Ann Arbor. So Texas is not messing around with their non-conference schedule.
Yeah, and Texas lost two running backs preseason out for the season, due to injury and fall practice. So Uh, Texas may have some depth issues. We'll see, but I still predict Texas to find a way to win in Michigan. I'm not convinced Michigan is the team they were last year. So,
No,
but again, a win in Ann Arbor is never a hand me. You gotta earn that. So,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
like the fact that Texas is scheduling these types of these games. That's awesome.
yeah. And to be honest, once I feel like Tennessee is in a place where they're restocking and kind of reloading every year and not having to. um, rebuild from the ground up because of some scandal or just terrible coaching, whatever it is. I don't mind scheduling these tough non-conference games. I mean, I'd be happy to play uh, Big Ten, ACC, Big 12 teams more often, and we may see more of that just as evidenced by these scores. The gap seems to be widening between these Power Four teams and the other conferences. So
Right.
it'll be interesting to see because I do know that these other schools, like your Murray States and Arkansas Pine Bluffs, can really use the big checks, the big payouts that they get from these games.
Yeah. They need more than one uniform.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
not to mention if they have other sports, which most of them do, they need that money too. So yeah,
Yeah. Well,
that's a good thing.
yeah. Moving on to South Carolina against Old Dominion.
Yeah.
South
This is
Carolina just
this
checking
is
everybody's heart health.
this is unacceptable on every level, in my opinion, to struggle against Old Dominion. This could lead to, a hot seat situation. I don't wish that on them. But if you're South Carolina, you got to take care of Old Dominion. They did get the win, and I know you say ugly wins are still a win, and that is true. But Old Dominion, that should have been what we're talking about with Arkansas, Missouri. That should have been a 50, 50 to nothing type deal.
Yeah.
Maybe Old Dominion is really that good, but man, you're going into Kentucky next week at South Carolina. That is, I'm not predicting South Carolina to escape Lexington with a victory there, not based on that performance this week.
No, no, not after a 23-19 win. Um, Mississippi State, um, I've got good friends who are big Mississippi State fans. Uh, Glad to see them win 56-7 over Eastern Kentucky.
Love it.
Um, the, you know, when they had their run with Dan Mullen and Dak Prescott, I was excited to see Mississippi State doing well. Um, I want to see more of those years where they're really competing in the SEC, really pushing teams. Um, Not sure what it's going to be like at Arizona State um, this next week. You're coming off Eastern Kentucky. You've got some confidence. I don't know a whole lot about Arizona State. There's been so much shakeup on in the West with the Pac-12 dissolving and all that. Like I don't know how that has affected the teams that were once part of the Pac-12. Um, I mean, even moving to other Power Five conferences, I guess Power Four conferences, like it's still. I mean, I don't know. It's weird how the West has been handled, uh, how the West has been won, so to speak. But good job, Mississippi State in week one.
Yeah, and Mississippi State, Arizona State will be an interesting matchup, a good test for both schools. Arizona State, their head coach his name's escaping me now, but he used to be the offensive coordinator at Auburn. He is a very good head coach, but he's a young head coach,
Yeah.
and Arizona State has the potential. Some call them a sleeping giant, like they call Houston, UCF, and some of the other. Arizona State has the potential to become a player, especially in the Big 12. But Mississippi State, they have Lebby. They got Lebby from Oklahoma. That's their new head coach. You get 56 points in your first week. I think Mississippi State, if they can just, get some solid recruiting wins in the state of Mississippi against Ole Miss, which, I think is certainly doable. I think Mississippi State is not a team that you're ever going to see maybe win the SEC, but you're going to see them have some better years. So yeah, I'm excited for them. I love seeing them beat up on Eastern Kentucky, and I'm rooting for them next week against Arizona State.
Yeah. Um, Staying in Mississippi, Ole Miss taking on Furman, 76 nothing. I mean,
Yeah,
Lane
this is Lane
Kiffin.
Kiffin, Lane Train. Yeah, man.
I said this the day that he was hired at Alabama, knowing the offensive mind that he is, putting Lane Kiffin with Nick Saban defenses, Alabama's going to be unstoppable, and they near were. I was I was very shocked at that hire that Saban would hire someone with so much offensive firepower on their resume. Um, but I was like, you're this is a deadly pairing, these two, and knew that Kiffin would go on to do these types of things. I did not hate the idea of him returning to Knoxville. I'm totally okay with Heupel. I'm more than okay. I'll take Heupel
Yeah, no,
over
Tennessee
Kiffin at
has
this
their
point.
guy for sure.
Um, but before I knew who Josh Heupel was, what was going on, I was okay with those Kiffin rumors because I knew he'd be doing things like he's doing now at Ole Miss. When he got to Ole Miss, they were in no good shape. And just like I said with Arkansas, putting up 76 points is not easy no matter who you're playing. They played Furman, they got the win, and they're now preparing for Middle Tennessee.
Well, 76 points, that's the most an SEC team scored this week. So, yeah, Lane Kiffin, he's flexing, and he will continue the Lane Train to Middle Tennessee. They're going to win that game very likely, and then Ole Miss, a playoff team. What do you think?
Until somebody proves me wrong, I think they can do it because Lane Kiffin is such a good offensive schemer. Kind of like Tennessee, you either have to have one of the most impressive defenses around to shut down that offense, or you have to have an offense that can keep up. And there's very few defenses that can shut down Lane Kiffin this year, I believe, and there's very few offenses that can keep up with Ole Miss. And so that's really the only way you can beat them. I just don't see it happening often enough to keep them out of the playoffs.
I think they make the playoffs this year. I don't predict them to be in the SEC champions, but I do think they
No,
make the
no.
playoffs.
Yeah, agreed. I think they do have a couple of those games where they slip up
Yeah.
and don't make it to Atlanta, but I think they still get an invitation.
Well, they might make it to Atlanta, but I don't think they win the championship. But I do think they likely are going to make the playoffs. Now, all this is speculative. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah. Well, ESPN hasn't hired us, so
Not yet,
we
Bradley. Yeah,
we can't be that good yet.
yeah, we're staying humble and as we should. So
Yeah, in memory of our executive producer Chris Murphy.
yes.
Alabama takes on Western Kentucky. This is the beginning of
Yeah, can our new running gag be like us just dump on Alabama?
hey,
Can that be
I'm okay. Uh
Chris isn't
60
here, so like I feel like we should
yeah,
just
and
yeah.
he can't defend himself, so we can just unleash 63 nothing. Like I really wanted to see 80, maybe 90 points from Alabama. This is a subpar effort.
Yeah, only 63. Yeah. Saban
At
was
this
shaking his
point,
head. Yeah,
I I think Vanderbilt's going to be looking in the rearview mirror at Alabama. I mean,
clearly.
I
Yeah.
um
Western Kentucky did have TJ Lindsey, who was the quarterback at Auburn there for a while. He was
yeah,
at Texas State last year. So it's not like they didn't have, a team that had a reasonable quarterback. But yeah, I mean, Kalen DeBoer, he's a very good coach. Alabama has great recruits. They are stacked. They're not going away. Yeah, this is going to be another year that Alabama is likely going to do really well. And there's really not many schools that can do anything about it. Hopefully Tennessee can. Hopefully Auburn can. But
Yeah,
yeah, Alabama's they're a good team for a reason, and that's not going to change this season.
yeah. I mean, Saban left Alabama in a really good spot for whoever's coming after him. I would not want to be that guy,
No,
but
me neither.
63 nothing is a good start.
Yeah, it's Western Kentucky, but they're gonna get some tougher opponents here pretty soon, and Alabama will get tested, and then they'll probably be just fine. I did enjoy seeing Ryan Williams, one of their top five-star wide receiver recruits, get a touchdown. His very first pass, he had a touchdown. He had two touchdowns on that game. Yeah, Alabama's not hurting, and they have, I think, as of now, the number two recruiting class for this year. So yeah, don't
Yep,
don't
they're
ever
they're
sleep
not.
on Alabama just because Saban's gone. They're not going away.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, DeBose has a playoff win more recent than Nick Saban. Um,
That's
I
true. Washington, yeah, was in the championship game against Michigan. Yeah, I think he's uh, as far as I can tell right now, he's a good person to be in the shoes,
yeah,
and what will he do with that? Well, it remains to be seen. But right now, he's on a good trajectory. So
yeah, yeah. Well, they've got South Florida next.
yeah,
So
easy
we'll be
win
talking
there.
about that next week.
Yep. Piece of
Uh,
cake.
then we've got Auburn took on Alabama A&M, uh, winning 73-3. Um, Jared, we were texting about this a little bit last night. The reason that Auburn's doing so well, yeah, they've got Hugh Freeze, but basically their GM, director of player personnel, head of recruiting, Will Redmond, kid out of, I guess he's not a kid anymore, guy out of Nashville, Tennessee. I I was a few years ahead of him, but saw him grow up, went to church together. By the way, the guy's a pretty mean drummer.
Is he?
Just
Huh.
saying, he's
Didn't
got
know that.
talents off the recruiting trail. But Auburn, there's like Hugh Freeze is getting his system in place. He's getting his guys in place. I expect more of this out of Auburn this season and in the seasons to come.
Yeah, I'm not ready to say Auburn's gonna win more than 7 or 8 games this season, but seeing 73 points. Yes, it's Alabama A&M, so yeah, that's a given. But man, it was really nice as an Auburn fan to see the offense, see something different, see a lot of great touchdowns that were passes, see the freshmen wide receivers get involved. Really excited for the future of Auburn, and they got Cal coming up next. Cal did not look good in week one against UC Davis. Cal's got to come all the way down to Auburn, play in the humidity. I'm predicting Auburn probably handles business against California. So it'll be nice to see Auburn, kind of get a nice little start here. They're going to get tested pretty quickly. I don't know that major test will be California, but they've got Oklahoma right after Oklahoma plays Tennessee. I'm actually going to be at that game,
All
so we'll see
right.
if we can get some little video clips to post here. But yeah, there's a lot to be excited about as an Auburn fan right now. Their recruiting is on fire. They're potentially going to land the quarterback from Notre Dame as a flip. That's Deuce Knight,
Yep.
along with a number of other guys that are predicted. There's crystal ball predictions for flips for Auburn's recruiting class. So Auburn could end up with a top three recruiting class. And I don't think that's an accident. You mentioned Will Redmond. I think we stole him from LSU for a reason. And now there could be some pretty exciting recruiting wins for Auburn in the future. And it certainly looks that way as of now. So as an Auburn fan, I'm thrilled. Now, does that mean they're going to, dominate everybody this year? I don't think so. I think they're going to have a better season than they had last year. And I think we're setting ourselves up kind of like Miami has done, over the next couple of seasons. They have a couple stacked classes and have the right pieces of the puzzle in place, and then you can start seeing Auburn potentially beat Alabama again, beat Georgia again. You might even see that sooner than later, but
Yeah.
consistently you might start seeing those things.
Well, I think one of the first things that you have to do at a place like Auburn, at a place like Tennessee, um, when Saban got to Alabama, taking care of business against the cupcakes. I
Yep.
mean, I've seen more than my fair share of Tennessee games losing to a cupcake, or like South Carolina squeaking by these these opening weekend games, these early games, homecomings. Um, but seeing Auburn take care of business against Alabama A&M, like score a lot of points, get your guys out, let the younger guys get some live game reps. That's what it's about. But you can't do that unless you're putting up 30, 40 points in the first half. So
Well, yeah, there was a mercy rule, so to speak, where at halftime, they checked with the Alabama A&M coaches and they decided to limit the quarters to 10 minutes in the second half. So it could have been way more than 73.
yeah,
I think Alabama A&M was just kind of glad to, grab their hamburger, get on the bus and head home. So, uh, nobody wants to get hurt first week of the season, but yeah, it was nice to see some of those younger guys get some reps and really enjoyed what I saw from that game. I did watch that game and the crowd was hyped. It was, uh, just a refreshing feeling for Auburn to see them handle business in this fashion, which they have not been doing the last several years. So it's good.
yeah. That's very, very great to see.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, if I'm that coach at Alabama A&M, I'm like, no, I'm good with 10-minute quarters and check, please. We're ready to
Yeah,
go.
I don't think they have anything to be ashamed of. Auburn's, obviously a better team, and Alabama A&M, I don't think is a terrible team. I think they'll go on and probably handle business in the SWAC and be kind of in the thick of things there. But yeah, they're just outmatched, and it is what
Yeah.
it is. So
Um, as you said, Auburn has California at home this week. Have a blast. That's going to be fun.
yeah, that's
Um,
likely a win.
yeah,
I don't see California traveling that far and then being in the humidity, and then after the week showing with UC Davis this past weekend, I don't think
yeah.
they're going to be able to handle Auburn, but stranger things have happened. So
And speaking of not being able to handle things, Texas A&M at home against Notre Dame losing 23-13. I mean, it was kind of neck and neck
yeah,
for a long while, and uh, Texas A&M just couldn't hang on. A&M's been through it the last couple of years.
they have. Yeah.
Spending a lot of money to get Jimbo Fisher, spending a lot of money to get rid of Jimbo Fisher, and not seeing the desired results
Just bad
for
luck.
A&M.
They've had
Yeah,
top recruits. I mean, they've had everything you would need to win, and it just hasn't translated. But that said, I don't think Texas A&M should be embarrassed or ashamed of a loss to Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is a quality opponent. I'm not predicting them to, to win anything major this year. I think they could be a playoff team just because they're
yeah,
Notre Dame and the media loves them. But for Notre Dame to go down to College Station and get a win like that, that's good for them.
yeah,
And I think Elko is a smart guy. He was able to turn around things at Duke. I think he's going to be just fine at Texas A&M. I think they're going to be a better team for it. So yeah, there's no shame in losing to Notre Dame. If anything, I'm proud of Texas A&M for having the courage to, schedule these tough teams in week one, just like Florida
yeah,
scheduled Miami. There's plenty of examples, where other schools have chosen not to do that, and rightfully so. But Georgia scheduled Clemson, so when you see these teams, even LSU with USC, you don't be ashamed of that loss. It stinks. It's USC. You should have won that, but at the same time, at least you played a quality opponent, and you learn from it. And we've seen Brian Kelly in the past, take a loss in week one, and then go on and have a good season. So I
yeah,
think Texas A&M is going to be probably going to be all fine. They're probably going to be all right. I don't think this is going to be a really super down year for them. I think, that was a tough loss, but they'll rebound.
yeah. And I'm excited to have the renewed Texas A&M
Absolutely.
in the SEC.
Yeah, that matchup is especially for that rivalry for Texas A&M and Texas fans. That's a big deal. It's great to have it back for college football, and yeah, I can't wait to watch that game. So I'll be watching. I won't be there, but I'll be watching it for sure.
Yeah,
So
that the Red River rivalry, Iron Bowl,
Yeah,
third
keeping
Saturday
those
in
is important.
October.
Yeah, those are good games. You don't want to lose those.
I
So
mean, we are stacked with great games, great rivalries in
absolutely.
in this conference. Um,
And it's
uh,
fun to see Texas and Oklahoma play some of these old conference foes that they had in the
yeah,
past, like Missouri, like Texas A&M. But remember, Arkansas used to be in the SW, the Southwestern Conference, right? So
yeah,
there's some of these teams that kind of get to renew some of those rivalries and stuff, and that's pretty cool. And that the fact that that could be encapsulated in the new SEC, yeah, I'm okay with it. So
yeah. I am too. By the way, Texas A&M gets a rebound against McNeese. Uh,
yeah,
Kentucky against Southern Miss got the win, 31-0. Um, not scoring as many points as a lot of these other teams, but I mean, Kentucky with Mark Stoops, you're not going to score a lot of points.
nope,
You're going to see more defense, but uh, taking care of business.
yeah,
That
that's what you expect.
yeah, and I think that's you took care of business. You look pretty good doing it. Getting ready for the first SEC matchup of the season when South Carolina comes to town. Um, as you touched on earlier, I'll echo. I don't think South Carolina comes out of Lexington um, unscathed. I think Kentucky.
That's their
Uh,
first loss.
yeah, I think Kentucky
Chalk
is
it
going to
up.
be sitting atop the SEC
Yes.
um, after week two. Uh,
Yeah. I'm
but
glad to see that Stoops didn't bolt for Texas A&M. That might have been a temptation. There probably was some money there that, could have been like, hey, that's a nice thing to think about. But the fact that he stayed at Kentucky is great for Kentucky.
yeah,
And I think at the end of his career, he might, end up being one of the top coaches ever there, maybe even the winningest. So, he's in a good spot. He's loved there. And Kentucky, there's not the pressure like there is at, some of these other schools. If you go 8-4 in Kentucky, you're not going to get fired. You're
yeah,
pretty good. Where you go 8-4 at Alabama, that's a problem. But in
yeah,
Kentucky, that's not the way it is. So I think Stoops is in a good spot, and do I see them winning the SEC championship? Maybe eventually, but I don't see it happening right now. But that's okay. They're not a bad team. You shouldn't sleep on them. And Kentucky is Auburn's got to play Kentucky this year, and I don't think anybody that's a true Auburn fan thinks, hey, we're just going to walk in there and that's going to be a hand me game. I think we
yeah,
all got that one circled as hey, that could be one of our losses. So
yeah. With Stoops at Kentucky, I never overlook that game
yep,
as a fan because Stoops is going to have his team ready to play, and they're going to be a challenge to beat. Um, whether they're having a good season or not, it's going to be tough.
I've often wondered if you put Kentucky like in the Big 12 or if you put them in the ACC, even if you didn't see them be like a top school,
Yeah,
possibly,
yeah.
yeah,
I'm right there with you. And the sour grape on top of our week one SEC
yeah,
slate, LSU, Southern Cal. This was an exciting game.
it was.
Like it was a great game to end week one of the college football uh kickoff weekend. Florida State and Georgia Tech, week zero. Like that was different. But week one,
Right.
what a way to end it. LSU loses to Southern Cal 27-20. This was in Vegas, which is not like it's not hard to get from LA to Vegas. It's a little harder to get from Baton Rouge to Vegas.
Mhm.
So much like Georgia, not quite as much like Georgia playing a week one game in Atlanta on a neutral site. Um, I think though LSU does travel well, the team has more travel time trying to get to Vegas, and so that's really how I kind of judge some of these neutral site games. Um, and LSU put up a good fight, but just kind of ran out of gas at the end.
Yeah. USC's offense was one I knew you had to pay attention to. I wasn't sure their defense would be able to hang with LSU, but clearly their defense has improved. So I'm going to give credit where it's due to USC. And Brian Kelly consistently is a good coach.
Yeah,
He doesn't always win the big games, as we've seen, but I don't think this game ultimately determines LSU's season. I think LSU is still going to be a tough team. And if people are saying, hey, LSU is not, they're down this year, we're going to walk in there and, get an easy win, you might want to think again. So this is probably the wake up call. The sleeping giants awoke. So if you're Nicholas State or whoever's out right after LSU, you might be in trouble.
yeah, yeah.
So,
I, you know, one of LSU's corners is a true freshman.
yeah,
They were trying to pick on him, especially at the end there, and he had a pass interference penalty, which was not helpful, and I think that was part of LSU's downfall was
yeah, it was.
too many penalties.
Well, and some of those were questionable.
Yeah,
If you had some of those calls go another way, maybe we see a different outcome. But
yeah,
you can't do much about that. So
yeah. But like that true freshman corner, he's not going to play like a true freshman for too much longer. You know,
no,
he's he's starting as a true freshman for a reason,
right,
and I thought he played pretty well against USC's best
yeah.
last night. So, um, yeah, don't define LSU season by the loss to Southern Cal. Like you said, I think this is going to be one that you look back on and say, "Hey, we learned some things and we grew from it." So,
Well, Josh Pate is predicting Southern Cal to be a playoff team. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll see how they handle the Big Ten.
yeah,
But this is certainly a quality win for them, and we'll see how the rest of the season plays out.
yeah,
But I think all in all, the SEC is still the top conference in college football. People can argue that all day, but overall, the competition is what it is. It is brutal. It is a gauntlet, and in my opinion, top to bottom, it's certainly better than the Big Ten. History shows that. So. Um, yeah, let's see who gets to that playoff there in the end. But man, it's going to be a fun season. I'm so glad college football's back. I'm
ah,
thrilled for the schools that pulled out these victories, like Vanderbilt and some of these other schools that they got some good points in and good playing time for some of these younger guys, and it's going to be a fun year.
yeah. I've been very excited about this uh, for a while. Had to watch Remember the Titans a couple weeks ago. Uh,
Oh yeah, great movie. Yep.
before everything really kicks off, I kind of got to get that in
Yeah,
just to get fired
Rudy.
up about football season.
Oh yeah, I
But
get it.
I'm very excited about where the SEC is, quality over quantity. Um, I don't I don't really see I don't see the SEC expanding for quite a while. I could be wrong,
Yeah,
but
that's a good question. Let's go there for a moment before we wrap up here.
yeah,
If the ACC implodes, what impact, if any, do you think that would have with the SEC? Do you think they grab a North Carolina? What do you think might happen there?
I don't know because it used to be all about TV dollars.
Sure.
And that's why I don't think Clemson was ever from the outside seemed seriously considered. Um, but I do think you're going to look at, okay, fan bases. Oklahoma and Texas have these huge, rabid fan bases that fit in with the SEC. I think Florida State does have that. I think um, maybe Miami, maybe Clemson. I don't think those fan bases are quite the same as Florida State's. So I do see Florida State coming in if the ACC um, kind of gets divested. Um,
Well, I do think that's likely. I do think eventually you'll see something fall apart there. and you'll
Yeah.
see some of these schools have the now option to go somewhere else, and then that's when it's like, okay,
I mean, yeah,
who goes where? I think you'll see, I mean, it would surprise me if the Big Ten doesn't grab a school or two. It would surprise me if the SEC doesn't grab a school or two, and then you see some of these other outliers end up in the Big 12, and um, yeah, then who knows?
yeah. I mean, I don't know because at what point are you too big? And I know that's something that the Big Ten is already running into. Um,
Yep.
so that's where if the SEC adds more teams, are they dealing out some teams? Is Vanderbilt's time in the SEC running out? I don't know.
Mm.
I know
I
Vanderbilt
Yeah, I'm
doesn't
not
want
sure about that. Yeah.
I it's because at what point is it too big to manage where you're not playing the teams in your conference enough? I don't know. I'm glad I'm not in Sankey's shoes trying to make these decisions because I'd say somebody else make them.
Well, we all know it's the mighty dollar, that'll dictate what happens, and that will likely mean to schools being in other conferences. That's
Yeah.
just probable. Um, yeah, I think North Carolina would be a good fit.
Yeah.
People could argue Florida State. I know you weren't keen on Clemson being in, but strategically, regionally, maybe it makes sense. Outside of that, I'm not sure. I've heard rumblings of like a Virginia, which I wouldn't have pictured Virginia in the SEC, but who knows, man? Let's see what
Yeah.
happens. We're not there yet. Right now, we have a really good conference, and I'm sure that's going to play out through this year. And wouldn't surprise me if we see an SEC school be the national champs again. So.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, like a Virginia, North Carolina, those schools have more of an impact come November when we get into basketball season.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
And is the SEC going to look at, okay, we feel good about football. We can afford to add some teams that maybe aren't that upper echelon in football, but they can bring in other sports to help us really round out our
totally.
sports offerings. And
Well, that's
they,
that's the Big 12 has made no secret. They want to split up their media contracts so that the basketball package is different from football, and
yeah,
they're potentially going to pull in UConn for that reason, and but the SEC can play that game too, so can the
yeah,
Big Ten.
yeah,
So yeah, it's going to be different. But that said, man, Saturdays watching Tennessee football, Auburn football, that's just not going to be something that I'm going to skip out on. I don't care what happens. So
ab
yeah.
absolutely. Well, Jared, thank you so much for joining us this season. Can't wait for week two. The season started. Hang on to your seats because it's going to be a wild ride over the next few months and into the great unknown of no divisions, 16 teams and a 12 team playoff. Um,
Absolutely. And I will say this, Bradley,
yeah,
let's just close some final comments here. If people want to support the show, what's your Venmo? I know that's one of the best ways that people can do that.
yeah,
Maybe throw a little bit to kind of keep this thing going and improving. So,
yeah. I'm gonna have to get a Venmo. I will set one up. I
okay. No Venmo.
honestly, I
Cash
let my
App.
I
No?
let my wife handle all that. But
Fair
first thing
enough.
you first
Coming next year.
yeah
Next episode. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, first thing is go follow us on social media at TSIO Pod. Um, you may see some images and video from the planes next week. Uh, but hey, social media is a fun place to hang out. Um, and you can always message us podcast at third Saturday in October.com. Let us know your thoughts. You can drop us a little voice memo. Tell us what you thought of uh, Texas 52-0 over Colorado State, or LSU just falling flat at the very end against USC. Tell us what you think of these games. Tell us what you think of Texas and Oklahoma being in the SEC. We'd love to hear from you. And Jared, thank you for being a supporter of this show as from day one, and looking forward to having you on this season.
Yeah, look forward to this season. Look forward to next week. Thanks, everyone.
See y'all.